I'm Alastair Beddow. I'm the Managing Director here at Meridian West. Really excited to have you join us for the second in our Client Listening in Action webinar series. Really excited today to be joined by Ian from Intertrust Group, and I'll let Ian introduce himself to you in a moment. Before we do that, just a quick introduction from our side. So those of you who don't know Meridian West, we've been working for the last 2 decades to support professional services and B2B organizations. And one of the key areas that we support is around their client listening and CX programs. This webinar series is really intended to showcase what some of the leading organizations are doing in this space. Those of you who joined us for the first of our webinars last week, are a couple of my colleagues, Sylvia and Bertie, talking through some of the key trends that we're seeing shaping CX and client listening today, some of the lessons that we've learned from our recent experience working with firms in this field, and some of our predictions around things to focus on for the year ahead. The recording of that session is available on our YouTube channel, so do catch up with that if you can. And just a quick plug for our next session coming up this time next week. Another case study, this time with the team from DAC Beechcroft, who will be telling us a little bit about their journey towards making client listening more of a cultural norm within the firm. Talking a little bit about how their program helps to support account management, proposition development and service improvement, and some of the challenges that they faced in their journey and how those have been overcome. So if you haven't signed up for that already, we definitely encourage you to do so. But in terms of today, very excited to have Ian with us. He'll be talking a little bit about Intertrust and their program, in particular thinking about how that works across many territories globally, thinking about the role that technology plays in that, how he's really driving action internally within the business and closing the loop on the feedback. We also want to leave plenty of time for Q&A. The chat function should be open, so as we go through, if you've got questions for Ian, please do submit them. I'll be looking out for them as we go through and try and field them, but also leave a bit of time at the end for that as well. So, Ian, welcome. Really nice to have you with us today. I think what would be a really great starting point for people is maybe just to introduce yourself, but also give people a little bit of a flavour of Intertrust. They may not have come across you before. Just fill us in, kind of who Intertrust Group are.
Sure, no problem, Alastair. So obviously, my name's Ian Bennison. I'm the Marketing Operations Director at Intertrust Group, who are I suppose our best description is a business process administration company. So we do a lot of accountancy, corporate secretarial work across lots of different sectors, predominantly the fund sector. So we work with a lot of the big fund companies, and we cover all sorts of things for them. We operate in 31, I think, countries, but we've got a wider global reach through partners. But yeah, that's basically who I am and who Intertrust Group is. I mean, the reason that I'm here is that obviously when I arrived, I was asked to look at a client listening program. So that's how I got started in Intertrust on this. I'd done it previously at another firm, so it's not something that was new, but it was something that the chief exec wanted virtually on day one of me arriving.
So let's maybe go back to that. A couple of years ago, you joining the organisation. Obviously, as you said, key priority from the CEO. Can you say a little bit more about why that was such a priority? What were the kind of team really looking to get from a program like this?
It's interesting. I do wonder sometimes if there's an element of, I think we should have one, but at least this time I had a clear steer that one of the clear issues they wanted was an early warning system for issues with clients, but also that sort of quickly merged into we really need to understand what our clients need from us going forward as well in a world that is constantly changing and you need to adapt. So it was basically those two elements, and then when the CEOs changed, I've got a really client focused CEO now, more than the other one. So it is more about building that program into the DNA of the company and acting on feedback from clients.
So tell us a little bit about what shape the feedback actually takes. I mean, what kind of insights are you collecting from customers and clients?
So literally to try and do it over 30 countries, I needed technology, and I needed at this stage an email type survey in the first year anyway, because I really wanted to embed it into all the countries, because I work with each of the country MDs on the program. It's their program. I just almost run it for them. So I wanted something that was scalable, that we could start relatively simply, but also that would help us get the buy-in and the value of it. And then I could obviously scale on the back of that a lot faster. So that was my initial. I was just going to keep it really simple. So email survey only. And then, but my presentation to Exco at the beginning of the journey was that journey. So we start here, but then we layer on more and more ways that we can get feedback, but more importantly, the easy ways that clients could give feedback.
And you mentioned a nice phrase. I think you said that you're working with 30 plus territories, but you want this to be their program, something that they have kind of ownership into.
Yeah.
How do you manage that dynamic? Because I could imagine, with 30 plus territories all wanting a say, getting something off the ground to start with is a challenge. So tell us a little bit about how you balance people's interests internally, but also building that momentum.
It is a challenge, and you are exactly right. And I've got very different views across various jurisdictions around the world, how we do these things and what we ask clients and all those elements. So the key thing for me was that I wanted each region to have a stake in it initially. So I formed a steering committee at the beginning with one of our Exco members as the chair, that when we're looking at the principles, the questions, we got common agreement at that level. So then when I got into the tactical execution of it and I'm approaching each MD, I had that little bit of a backup that, well, your region have agreed to this. And, I think I learned from the last time I did this, I built a set of questions that were that I mandated virtually across each country, but then I gave them flexibility by allowing them to have a couple of questions that they could decide that wasn't it didn't detract from the program and from a measurement and analytical perspective, but it just gave them that ability to feel if there was a question that I wasn't asking that was really close to their hearts, whether it was a problem or changes, that they could ask that themselves.
And have they taken that offer up?
No, not one.
Oh, really?
So
interesting.
I can only assume that the questions that we came up with were pretty good in the first place. That we do have, I'm saying none. We do have on some of our different services, we change the wording slightly just to give it a different nuance, because it's the same question, but we just ask it in a slightly different way. Particularly across some of our capital markets clients, where it's just a different end user, so to speak. So yeah, so it worked quite well in the first year's rollout. That all the MDs then thought, yeah, okay, this definitely works for us.
And have you encountered much, I guess, skepticism maybe, or pushback amongst 30 plus countries? There must have been some who were more resistant than others.
I would say partially, as in, let's say some countries were quicker to engage than others, but everybody engaged. I think there's that natural, if you have a feeling your country isn't performing at the highest level, then you're exposing your underbelly, I suppose, by actually showing these results across the business. Because one of the things that I insist on is that our dashboard that we use is there is no restrictions to who can see what. So the countries can go in and look at other countries. So that was a key thing for me. I didn't want this, only you can see this, no one else can. It was like, we're going to go into this open and honest, and whatever it tells us, we deal with. But no, I was surprised. I have to say my previous company, it was a lot harder, and I had 90 countries there, but there was definitely people who didn't want to do it. And here it was just the speed of engagement was probably a little bit different. But I think once you've got Exco buy-in, it's difficult for them not to engage, if I'm being honest.
And I mean, it'd be interesting to to give people on the webinar a little bit of a flavour of you've talked about 30 plus countries in terms of a kind of central kind of team or resource to actually deliver a program like that. Tell us about how you're resourced centrally.
So there is literally me. I'm virtually running it with obviously with the support of Meridian West. I don't have anyone else internally. What I do have, which I suppose it's a slight contradiction, that each of the countries, depending on their size, I do get some support from them in making sure that we're tracking follow-up, making sure the data samples are produced. But literally from a central perspective, using the outsourced support plus the technology, I can do this on my own.
And you've mentioned the technology there, so let's have a little bit of a kind of dive into that. So can you tell us a little bit about how that's really kind of driving what you can do at scale? How are you using technology to support your work?
So I think that the beauty of having technology, there's two things. One, there's all about the flexibility of the delivery. So if we, last year we did try a couple of questions that were more market insight type of things that we quickly found didn't work. Now, in previous things I've done, that would have been tricky. That would have been the whole program needed to answer those questions. We could change things very quickly. The big thing for me, apart from the delivery and the flexibility, is the dashboard and the data visualization. Because with a good platform, I think you get that buy-in a bit quicker, because I think people realize that one of the things I didn't cover, which I won't dwell too much on, is that the company had done things like this in the past, but not in a programmatic way. It was very much, we'll do a survey for global clients this year, and the feedback was in PowerPoints and spreadsheets, and I tried to follow them, and it was like really difficult. So giving the business an easy way to see the data, giving them an easy and quick way that they can see survey responses instantaneously, that they can act on them, I think just makes it so much easier. And obviously the benefit for me is that ability to move quickly at scale. And it was a case of, well, how many clients can I have? Well, as many as you want. There's no restriction to how many we can ask. And so again, that got the buy-in from the larger countries that have a big client base, like the Netherlands and Luxembourg for us.
And so, I guess if I'm in the shoes of one of your country MDs, and for those on the webinar, they'll have maybe heads of practice groups, heads of sectors, heads of maybe countries as well. What they're kind of head of MD type role. What kind of outputs am I getting back from you, if you like, as part of that program? Obviously talked about the dashboard. What kind of things do I have access to? What do I see? What do I get back?
So literally, you can see a mixture of everything that the clients have responded on against your questions. And the way that our dashboard is built is there's an overview page for senior management where all the results roll up and they can compare regions and countries and service lines and all that element. Then we've got things that are really pertinent to MDs. So I can see against my service attribute questions, I can visually see, and you can see almost immediately where I have issues compared to others.
Mm.
So, you know, communication, I score really highly, great. But proactivity, well, that's a bit concerning. So it allows them to act on things quickly. Plus, you can drill down into any of the detail that you actually want. So, you know, we have a question maybe about future support from, you know, from a sales perspective. I can just look at all the answers for that across my country, across my region, across the business. So the ability to slice and dice everything is fantastic. The other thing that I really like about our platform is that you have that ability to do a lot of your analysis within the platform. So it's there automatically. So when we've done sort of correlation in the past, and it's all in spreadsheets and you're trying to then turn it into meaningful data, well, forget it. It's all done for you. It's built and I can see it live. And that I think, and this is probably a bit of a strange comment, but I think the more professional you look things, the better buy-in you get from your stakeholders.
Yeah.
If it looks a bit average, then I think it's sort of, well, you know, what's the value? But a bit like a shiny object, if you make it look good and that, it's like, oh, this looks really professional. And you know, especially when you show them what the client receives and you know, oh, look, it works on a mobile. All those elements just add a level of professionalism that I think they want to reflect onto the clients, that this is an important program for us. So please, will you buy into this program?
Yeah. No, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Almost having that, you know, that kind of slick visualization, the kind of, you know, easy, intuitive use certainly helps accelerate that kind of buy-in and engagement.
Yeah,
I mean, that's definitely my experience too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what about the, you know, you talked at the beginning about the, you know, the CEO and the exco having kind of, you know, ownership and oversight of the program. I mean, what are they receiving in terms of reporting and insights from you, and how receptive have they been to what's come back from the kind of insight from clients?
Very. Obviously, I feed a lot through my exco member, who's the chief commercial officer. So he reports at least quarterly on where we are, what we're doing, any key drivers or issues, especially if we can identify any systemic issues, he'll take that. But then last year I did a big presentation at the end of the year to the whole of Exco, and they're very, you can tell how engaged they are by the amount of actions you get at the end of that presentation. I always find that you know, and actually that they're asking questions all the way through. And so, yeah, I think they've bought into it. It'll be interesting in the second year as we just start the program for our next run. Again, I do think there'll be more engagement than last year, because I think now they've seen a full year's output, then there'll be, you know, okay, then what next? And we've already started to evolve the program for 2022 as well.
And maybe we could talk a little bit about that. So what's, you know, what is kind of next for Intertrust in your program? What would you see as some of the kind of key things you'd like to achieve for the next year ahead?
So because I'm resource and budget a little bit constricted at the moment, I'm not trying to boil the ocean. So this year we have a program for our top 67 clients that they have account owners. We call them global relationship managers, but they're going to be lifted out of the country surveys as they were last year, because we were just, you know, it was a big pilot, if I want to be truthful. You know, let's get 1 year in and learn from it. So this year we lift them out, and we'll do them separately with slightly different questions. But for our key clients, or a subset, we will do interviews this year as well. So we'll have that mixture of email surveys plus face-to-face surveys as well, just to try and get that greater depth of knowledge than, you know, don't get me wrong, we've learned a lot from the email surveys, but there's nothing better than having the right interviewer at a conversational type level to really extract real depth of understanding of what we do well, you know, what we do badly, things like that.
Yeah. And I'm also interested in this idea of once you're getting the feedback, and I know you've talked about obviously the principle of visibility across the organization, but also, you know, that you are producing these regular reports. But clearly there are going to be some more kind of tactical things that can be done, you know, individual client, you know, opportunities to address. How are you approaching that in terms of, you know, maybe closing the loop or driving the actual action that needs to happen once you've got the feedback in front of you?
So we do have a good, I was going to say, we do have a closing the loop process, again, driven on or partly driven through the technology. So any clients that score as poor or very poor go into an escalation cycle, which we track via the dashboard. What I tried to get over is that follow up for everybody is important. Whoever answers it, we really need to thank them, take on board their feedback. And I'm not sure how successful that was across every country. It definitely was very successful in a lot of countries. The bigger countries obviously find it harder with the volume of clients and stuff like that. But, you know, this year, I'm really seeing that engagement. How do we do this? How can we do it better? How can we get more responses? And I've been doing a lot of meetings this year that I didn't really expect, where they really want to extract more information, but more importantly, show clients that we are listening and we do act on their feedback.
Absolutely. Just a reminder for people that I think the chat should be open. If you've got questions for Ian, do fire them away, and we'll make time to answer them shortly. You also mentioned in passing before, I think, Ian, about, you know, actually some of the insight has been really useful in terms of driving sales, new opportunities. I mean, in some senses, it sounds like the investment in the program is actually, you know, you can kind of prove an ROI on that, if you like.
I would like to think we get better at that. I definitely, at the moment, would struggle to produce something that would stand up in court, so to speak, on the ROI. But again, in the previous firm I worked for that we did this, we actually linked that into our CRM system at the end. So when clients were actually talking about they may need more support in different jurisdictions, things like that, we would have a process that passed that straight on to sales, and we could track real ROI on it. At the moment, you're sort of basing, I would, if I had to do it tomorrow, and luckily I haven't been asked yet, it would have to be on retention and key sort of metrics like that. It'll be really interesting on the global clients where we give them their own program, because those are the areas that I think we will be able to really measure improvement, not only just from a scores level, but from a retention level and from a client growth perspective.
Yep, interesting. And you've kind of painted a great picture for us today about obviously, you know, implementing, scaling up this program, doing it with, you know, quite a thin kind of, you know, central resource and lots of buy-in. I mean, there must have been challenges on this journey, right? I mean, tell us about some of the things that maybe were the friction points as you went along and you know, lessons learned.
To be honest, I am amazed how frictionless this has been. I did have issues at the beginning where I had one particular ExCo member that was so against it. He really didn't want to do it, didn't think it was the right thing to do, wanted to focus on a really tiny set of clients. He then managed to filter that back to the chief executive, who got cold feet. But I think I stuck to, I'm really passionate on the topic, and you know, I can talk all day on it, and I think my learning, I think that gained me a little bit more traction, that I'd done it at a competitor, because my previous firm was a competitor. That this was the right way to do it. Trust me, and if I'm wrong, I'll hold my hand up. And so the chief exec then flipped back and said, okay, we'll do it. So yeah, but that was it really. I think this one, my previous one, was definitely not as easy as this, but I think I'm just a bit smarter. of how to get that engagement. And I have the battle scars from previous ones, so I think you learn, the two ends of the scale, exco level, MD level. They both want the same thing in a way, but they both want it completely different. And it's how to appeal to those stakeholders and sell the program in a way that makes them receptive.
Interesting. We've started to get a few questions in, which is great. So there's a bit of time to maybe look at a few of those. So the first couple of questions from Kim, asking a little bit about how you select the clients that were sent online surveys, a little bit about timing. Is that a kind of continuous process? And also maybe a little bit about the volumes you've achieved. Over the first year.
Let's see how many. We probably sent out about just under 9,000 surveys last year across our client base. The response rate wasn't great, but it varied dramatically by country. So some countries were very high, some were very low, and hence I said that we've got programs in to work on that. But really, I encouraged each of the countries, and I don't have access to their data, so I have to rely on them being honest with me and knowing the volume. But I just encourage them, especially on an email survey, the more the better, because you're never going to get 100%. I think industries, 5 to 25% is around the mark for email surveys.
Yep.
So I'm just a little bit below the halfway point. And I want that to be better. But the more, I would just encourage anyone doing this is just to try and get as many, as long as they're, they have to contribute something. There's no point surveying for the sake of it, but you want the volume in an email type survey.
And on that point, we've had a question from Duncan as well, who's asking about, the mix of kind of quant and kind of verbatim comment type questions. Is it a very short survey, or what's the kind of time commitment from the Intertrust clients to actually complete this?
So anyone that's ever done an airport or an airline survey will realise how to put off the people you're trying to gain from. We decided that the 5 to 7 minutes was the time we were after to complete the survey. We've got a mixture of questions. Some are just scoring questions that you just tick in the box, and we've got a handful of text questions. And they're the ones you get the value from. The scores are nice because you can track, you can measure, but it's the verbatim you really want. So it's just trying to get the balance. I don't make any of the verbatim mandatory because I think, again, that puts people off. And you find that I would say 70–80% fill in the text and some don't. And you just have to live with those. It's a buy-off or a trade-off, I should say.
And the question from Kelly, I know your kind of in-depth in-person reviews are something you're wanting to kind of scale up now, but can you say a little bit about how that's going to relate to the online component? Is there going to be a big kind of overlap, or are they seen as complementary?
They should be complementary. We have the ability to embed the feedback into the dashboard, so it's all in the same place. We're not storing stuff in spreadsheets. They will have an element of the questions that we have in the email survey, but I'll be giving the interviewers carte blanche. If the client wants to go off on a tangent, you can go with them, because I'm more interested in that feedback than I am of a set of scores.
Great. And I know we're quickly approaching the half-past mark, and I feel like we could talk for hours, Ian, on all of this. But maybe just to kind of bring the threads to a conclusion. From your experience, are there kind of a couple of key lessons that you'd pass on to the audience, things that you've learned throughout the process that you'd really highlight?
Definitely. You have to have your executive committee or your management board totally on board. That has to be. I would spend a lot of time on that before I even started thinking about the surveys. They've got to buy into it, because you will need them at some point to help you get over hurdles. But as we mentioned before, the second element, put yourself in the position of a country MD, a practice lead or whatever, and understand what they want from it, but try and sell the benefits of the program, i.e. that programmatic view is of value to the business, but how can I extract that local value for you? And I think if you get those two elements right, other bits will fall into place. And I think the final element of that is you've got to be flexible. There will be, no matter which business you're in, there is not a one size fits all. You will have to adapt, and then you'll learn from your own program and adapt your own program. So flexibility is a key one, and be prepared to change direction if necessary.
Great, fantastic. Thanks so much, Ian. I know we've covered a lot of ground, and I think the people on the call will have found this super helpful. It's great to hear about your program, the kind of evolution and the journey you're on. I know the Meridian West team has been really excited to be working with you on this kind of shared journey. The next session, as I mentioned at the start, next week we have Kim and Rachel from Daisy Beechcroft who'll be sharing some of their wisdom and experiences as well. So please do sign up for that. If you think anybody would benefit from hearing back what Ian's talked about today, we'll make the recording available on our YouTube channel shortly. And if you're interested to hear about some of the technology that Ian was mentioned, to see a demo of that and talk a little bit about that, do get in touch with myself or anyone in the Meridian West team, and we'd be very happy to obviously show you that. So thank you so much everyone for joining us today, and a big thank you to Ian for sharing all of your wisdom and insights. We really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Alastair.